Hi, my name is Mason Edwards, Dungeon Master and creator for Arcane Adventures. I'd like to welcome you to today's episode of Dungeon Master Deep Dive. While I typically pick a topic and elaborate on it during our typical episode, today I'd like to showcase how I communicate outside of session with my players, and that is through a Discord campaign server. Whether you're a Dungeon Master needing a way to organize your session notes, communicate with your players, and make announcements, or if you're a player just looking for a way to communicate as well, this is the episode for you. I'd like to talk about how I have my campaign organized and how you can also organize a campaign for yourself. I'd like to first start off with a home base channel. As you can see, I have encoded a Discord bot, which you can use for free by looking up Disco Hook. It's a free web-based embed that you can create and draft your own little quote-unquote bot. As you can see on this page, it says Welcome to Arcane Adventures, tells you a little bit about the background, and then has a plethora of rules for you to look through. And for convenience, I've put a little photo of our logo. Past this, you can see over here on the left, we have all the campaign channels. These are channels that all the players and myself have access to. It includes the home base channel that we just talked about, and places like the general chat, where players can just talk about whatever they want to, post memes, or anything like that. Below that, you'll see several channels, and the most important being probably the announcements chat. That is a place where you, as the Dungeon Master, can post announcements, and other players can't comment in them, but they can read those announcements and make reactions to them. Below that, you'll see our references page. You don't have to have a references page for your channel, but I use references to put places like maps or something so you can see kind of what I've posted here, maybe clues to puzzles, and maybe an active or campaign quest log. And you can do whatever you want. It feels fitting. It's not necessarily a requirement, but I would say that the general chat and the announcements and the references tabs are most likely the best ones for you to start out with. Below that, you'll see a story recap. Again, this is not a necessary channel, but it's a channel that I like to use because I can post where we are in the adventure for all of my players to recap. In case they missed a session or just want a refresher before the next one, they can read through chapter by chapter, session by session, and see what we've done. Below that are two channels that you may not need in your Discord server. For me, as you can see, it says flashbacks and live stream, and those are where we are hosting our series events for our YouTube content. So you can probably avoid those in your campaign channel. The next important thing I want to showcase is the events tab. Discord is equipped with an events program already. So you don't have to add your own calendar. All you have to do is click on the events button, and then you can click create event. As you can see, we have session 27 coming up tomorrow at 6 p.m. And we have our all-day event coming up on May 13th at 9 a.m. And this is just a place where you can store your upcoming scheduled events, name them whatever you like, include whatever details, and put a location. Before I move on to the next couple of sections of our Discord server, let me talk about the right-hand side of the panel. Discord obviously is equipped with roles. And while you can input your own self-roles if you want to, I find it best if the person running the campaign server, in most cases that would be the Dungeon Master, is in charge of assigning roles to certain players. Over here on the right, you'll see where I've broken up my role as the Dungeon Master and separated that from my players' roles. So, if you click on my tag, it just says Dungeon Master. And the Dungeon Master is functionally the admin over the entire server, so you don't really have to assign any other roles to you, because if they just type at everyone or at Dungeon Master or Game Master or whatever you prefer, they can get a hold of you. Below that, I've assigned roles to my players, as they call themselves the Glorious Bastards, or you can just use players. And so if you were to click on one person's name, then you would see all the different roles that I've given them. The first two being Glorious Bastards, the name of the group, and players. It happens to include the same one, and you can choose and pick which one. I've also added roles that aren't necessarily critical, but just a labeling organization type thing, where you can use different roles like variant. So, for example, Flint is a variant human, so I've attached both the variant and the human. He also multi-classes, and he's a fighter and a sorcerer. And then the group has also assigned their own little name, so he is quote-unquote the Tussle. And they'll have a little rhyme that goes with that. As you can see with their names, it has the player name listed first, and then in parentheses is their character name. And I think that's really easy for people to reference back and forth, especially in the general chat, at Kyle, parentheses, Atlasia. And so they know which player they're talking to and also which character they're talking to. Moving on from the campaign channels, let's move on to the Avre abilities. I highly recommend putting Avre abilities in your Discord server. Avre is a free Discord download bot equipped with all of the basic D&D 5e rules. It allows you to look up spells, roll dice, and do all kinds of stuff, both for players and as the DM. And you can access that from the app category or by going to a third-party Discord bot download. I separate Avre abilities from the bots because Avre is obviously a D&D bot versus the rest of the bots are just for fun. So none of these in the bots channel are necessarily required for you to have, but I think it's a fun little thing. So we have Cake Day, and you can see, people put their birthdays in here. Or we have the Arcane Level Up channel where it shows who's talking the most. And then we have some other things like Grow Our Tree, bot notifications, Go Fishing. Those are all just fun little mini games that the players can play on the side. It really encourages them to engage with each other. Moving on from the bots channel, this is a really important next section I want to talk about, and it's called player logs. I first came across this idea whenever I was building the server in the first place, and I thought to assign each player having their own individual player log. Each player and myself are the only people that have access to their specific player log. So I have 8 players and therefore 8 player logs, and none of the other players can read what is in anyone else's player log. So for them, in Atlasia's case, Atlasia under player logs only sees Atlasia's channel, which you can assign specific members or roles of your Discord server through Discord's admin functions. It's a great way to talk about content privately, both in and out of session. For example, if a player has a question for you about a certain mechanic and they don't want to reveal that they are using that mechanic yet, they can text you in the player log. And if they're in-game and they want to do something secretly, maybe split off from the group for something on a travel, they can message you privately. And so obviously having this open during your session is really helpful. Not required, but I think it's a great tool. We have a voice channels down here at the bottom, but we don't tend to use them because we use in-person channels, but it's just a nice addition, and Discord comes with one pre-added anyway, so I just left it on here. The last section I want to talk about is for Dungeon Masters only. I call it Dungeon Master Realm, but you can title the section whatever you want to, and in it you'll see a full list of DM private channels. So these are channels that only the Dungeon Master or Game Master has access to. You can see there's a DM Secrets where you can write down critical plot notes, whatever. There's also a separate plot notes section so you can keep track of where you are in your story. PC Details where you can keep track of your player characters. There's a rules channel where you can write down any house rules you have or any rules that you might easily forget and put that in there. There's one that I really want to talk about. We'll come back to Quicks links in a moment. Below that, you'll see the private search tab, where it is functionally the same as Avre abilities, where the players have access to it, except it's private for the DM. Still through Avre, but just its own separate channel, so you can, as the DM, can look up stuff and the players won't know what you're doing. And then there is a private AI channel. This is not required, obviously, but I use AI to maybe generate a random NPC name or some context. I don't really use it a lot, but it's just a nice little fun tool to have. I have talking points, which are notes that I would easily forget that I need to say during the session that are not necessarily gameplay related, but maybe announcements I need to make. And so I usually put talking points in there. And then extra stuff is just kind of like extra notes that you have, but those are not required. If you are a Dungeon Master or a Game Master, I would highly recommend putting in a DM Secrets / plot notes channel, a rules channel, and maybe a private search channel if you're going to use Avre. The talking points is also helpful. And the last one I want to talk about before we close today's video is the Quick Links tab. I thought about this just recently, but I decided to, instead of opening 30 tabs across my computer whenever I'm in session, I could link everything important to the campaign and all the notes that I have into a Discord page. As you've seen here, I have sorted them a little bit more fancily than you might have to, but I am a stickler for my organization, and so here we are. I have 2 separate sections called quick links to core online files, and I've broken them down by what they are. So the first right here are my web page links, and you can see I've linked my D&D Beyond campaign, my fantasy calendar, which is a great way to keep track of your calendars, and my YouTube playlist in case I want to play music during the session. Below that, I have slides and PowerPoints that you can see and access to. So there's character and NPCs pictures there, a loading screen in case you're just waiting before session, campaign map, which is obviously critical, and monsters and creatures, which is another pictures, PowerPoint, or slides, but it showcases more of the enemies instead of the friends and allies. Below that, I keep track of session notes, and then I have trackers for spreadsheets for an initiative and combat tractor. And below that, I have compendiums of homebrew content that I've made for myself, indexes, which are compiled across all kinds of sources, and folders for random generators so I can come up with random NPC names if I need to, that I have stored away in a separate document, or world lore folders where I have lore organized very nicely. And so all those links take you out of Discord, but they open quickly other documents that you might need. I really hope that this episode has been really helpful for you if you're looking to create a Discord server, and I would highly recommend using Discord as an online platform. It's really easy to use, very user-friendly, and there are a lot of videos that exist on the internet that you can find about how to do all the things we talked about in today's episode. As I said earlier, this is a little bit over the top for what you absolutely have to have for your campaign if you're going to do this, but I think this is a great little way to organize all of your notes, make contact between players, store files, put in references, make story recaps, and have general conversation. If you have any questions, message me in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Dungeon Master Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.